Hey guys, Jocelyn here from Fantasia Elegance. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make these triple hoop earrings. I did design these for someone special as a gift, but I figured you might enjoy getting to follow along and see how I made them. This is a triple hoop style, and the center one is beaded, and then the outer ones are wire and have some little decorative swirls to really set this piece off. So let's go ahead and dive right in. If you're curious about where you can get these specific tools and materials I'll be using, go ahead and check out the description section below. I will have links for where you can purchase these. But you will be needing some beads. I'll be using 4mm silver-filled metal beads, as well as some 4mm fiber optic beads, which I purchased on Amazon, and again I'll leave a link for where you can get these right below. And of course you can use whatever you like. I just think it looks nice to alternate those two. As far as wire goes, I'm going to be using some 18 and 20 gauge round dead soft wire. I'll be using silver filled from Rio Grande. And you'll also want some 26 gauge round dead soft wire, and I'm doing sterling for that. So to get started, let's take our 20 gauge wire, and we're going to cut a length of this. We are going to cut a 4.5 inch length. There we go. And to start out, go ahead and pull out your round nose pliers. We're going to put a very tight little spiral in the top of this. So I'm working with the very tip of my pliers on the very end of that wire to start spiraling it in on itself, just like that. And after I get to a certain point, I'm going to pull out my chain nose pliers to really tighten that on down, because I want the spiral wires to be almost just touching themselves. So I'm just going to work around, tightening that on down and continuing to form the spiral. And I really like my Xuron tweezer nose pliers for this because they can get in those tight little spaces to really manipulate the wire how I want to. So now I'm just using them to spiral this around. And if you're a little bit more heavy-handed on the wire, you might want to wrap your tweezer nose or chain nose pliers with some painter's tape or masking tape so that as you grip this spiral that you formed, you don't leave nicks or indents in that wire. So I'm just going to keep forming this spiral like that until the width of my spiral is just about 1/4 inch or 7mm wide, and then I'm going to take that tail and straighten it on out so that it's going straight down from the spiral, just like that. So you have a long straight length of wire with a little spiral on top. So go ahead and pull out your beads now, and I'm going to count off 9 of my little fiber optic 4mm beads here. And since I will be alternating them with the metal beads, we'll do 9 of these fiber optic ones, so I'll pull those off and set them aside. And then we're also going to be doing 8 of the metal beads, and again we will be alternating these. So I'm just going to start feeding them onto my stick here, and I'll be starting with the fiber optic and also ending with one of the fiber optic beads. And you don't have to use alternating ones, I just think it looks nice to have the metal spaced out with the glass, but of course you can use different gemstone beads, whatever you want, as long as they are about 4mm in diameter and have a large enough hole to scooch onto this 20 gauge wire that we're using. And once we've got them all threaded on there, we're going to take our tweezer chain nose pliers and bend that other tail off to the side, just at the top of where the beads are. And then I'm going to start forming another swirl on this end, and this swirl is going to be a little bit more open, but a slightly smaller width across than that other swirl that we made earlier. So I'm just using my round nose pliers and using that wire tail to form a very small but open little spiral, and you can refine this with your chain nose pliers if you need to. And you don't want the width of this spiral to be any more than about 5mm. So once you're happy with it, go ahead and trim off that tail, and I'll just squeeze this down to close it up a little bit more, and you want to make sure it's flat as well. There we go. So just about like that. You should have something that looks like this now, long string of your alternating beads, and I'm just going to use a standard glue stick to start shaping this into a round. You can use any round object that's about that same diameter, but I think glue sticks are pretty standard, and most people tend to have them lying around. So I'm just squeezing this down, making sure that it is a nice round shape. There we go, you should have something like that. And now we're going to take this tighter spiral that we made and stick it straight up, just like that. maybe a little bit more. There we go. And that's going to sit right in front of the base of our ear wire once we assemble this whole thing. And you might want to tighten down your circle a little bit because we want those two spiral ends to be a little bit closer to each other. So I'm just going to tweak that a little. Yeah, that looks better. There we go, so you should have that now. So now go ahead and pull out your 18 gauge round dead soft wire. We will be cutting a length of this to make our outer hoops. And you'll want an 8-inch piece. For those of you in metric, that's just about 20.5 centimeters. So go ahead and snip that off. There we go. And we're going to bend this right in the middle, so make a little U shape there. And then using our round nose pliers, we're going to put a little loop, again in the very center of this, crossing those two tails over, just like that. And then I'm going to grip this loop with my chain nose pliers, and just use my fingers to put in one very tight twist, just like that. Just one twist. We don't want this twisted area to be too long. So you should have something like that. And then I'm going to straighten out the two tails so they are running in a nice straight line to each other. There we go. Let's do the other side. So you should have that. So now we're going to put a very sharp 90-degree bend in each of these tail wires, just like that. And you want the spacing between these two bends to be just about 5 millimeters so that our beaded hoop can sit in between them. So we're going to bend this other one, and you want that little loop that we made to sit right in the center. And after you bend them, your two tails should be running exactly parallel to each other. So you might need to tweak it a little bit to achieve that. But you should have something that looks like this now, again with that little loop in the center, and our two tails running parallel. So take your glue stick out again. We're going to wrap this once more. And I'm pushing it with my fingers very tightly to make sure that it takes that shape and that circle diameter that I want it to. And then with your tails, you're going to take one on each side. So I gotta uncross mine. There we go. And you're just going to push those little tails down as well to continue that circular shape. Just like that. So you should have your double hoop frame made now. And let me just show you how it's going to sit inside here. So basically we're going to take our beaded one, slide it right in like that, and that little tight spiral we made will go in front of the loop. And then that smaller back spiral will fit in there just like that. So that's what we're aiming for. But for now, we just need to finish off these two ends here. So to do that, I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and I'm going to start putting in a very open spiral here. So working from the tip, and this is a little bit harder to do with the 18 gauge wire because of course it resists you more. So take your time, and don't get frustrated with it. You can always refine it with your chain nose or tweezer nose pliers, which is what I'm doing here. And these open spirals are very difficult to do, so like I said, don't get frustrated, take your time, and feel free to use different tools to get the effect you need. You don't just have to stick with your round nose pliers. So doing the same thing on that other one, just spiraling it in, but leaving it quite open. So you should have something like that. And you want the ends of those spirals to be just sitting right below that little twisted loop that we made, just like that. And now go ahead and pull out your 26 gauge round dead soft wire. We need to start connecting everything together. So for starters, I'll be cutting a 3-inch piece of this. And that's just about, let me see here, a little over 8 centimeters. For those of you in metric. And you don't really have to have an exact amount, that's kind of a minimum. So let's go ahead and cut 2 pieces of that. Again, 3 inches of your 26 gauge. And go ahead and set one of them aside. We'll just be working with one for now. So I'm going to nest these again like I showed you earlier with that smaller little spiral in the back. And I'm going to take one of my 26 gauge pieces and start binding that spiral to the edge of the frame. Just like that. And we're going to wrap it around several times. And make sure you don't catch that large open spiral that we made with this wire. We want to just be binding the edge of the frame with the center back spiral on the beaded portion. And I'm just going to keep putting in wraps with that wire, tightening each one as I go. And again, I really like my Xuron tweezer nose pliers for this because they can get in there where I need them to. And I like to keep going until I have about 4 or 5 good wraps. Just binding that center beaded wire to the outer frame. There we go. And again, tightening them down, making sure everything's flat and snug. So now I'm going to do one wrap just around the frame wire, so not going through that little spiral. I'm going to pull my outer frame spiral out of the way so you can see that I'm doing that, but you don't need to do that step. So I'm just wrapping it once around that frame, and then we're going to start wrapping it around that open outer frame spiral as well. So I've captured that frame spiral, and then I'm going to feed it up back through that space and pull it tight. And we're going to put in about another 4 wraps, again going around both of those wires now, so that you're closing up your outer frame hoop. There we go, and again pulling it tight with each one. So now we have immobilized that side of our hoop. And we'll just do a few more to really secure everything down and make sure it's not going to be going anywhere. There we are. And once you have a good 4 wraps or so around that, I'm going to again do a few just on the outer portion of the wire here. So only going around the one. And this will help keep your weaving wire, your connecting wire from unraveling if you go around just one wire several times at the end. So I'm doing that. I'm going to do about 3 or so. And then you can trim off the tail with your flush cutters. And of course, don't forget to tighten that tail on down with your chain nose pliers to make sure that there aren't any loose bits sticking out that could catch on fingers or hair or clothing. And you might want to just adjust things a little bit to make sure it's all lying flat and in line and where you want it to be. So we have this other tail now at the other end, and we're going to do the same thing, wrapping it several times around just one wire, pulling it very tight to secure it and make sure it's not going to unravel at all. So I'm going to do about 3 wraps just around this outer frame wire, pulling it tight at each one. Just like that. And as before, we'll trim that off and tighten down the end. There we go. So we've secured one side now. Should look about like this. And go ahead and make sure that little spiral's sitting right up against the center top. And we're going to go ahead and do that exact same thing on the other side now, using your other 3-inch piece of wire. We'll just bind it in all the same places, just mirror image. So here's what it should look like after you do that. As you can see, we're starting to connect all our pieces together. And we just have this little open bit here that still moves, so we need to attach that to the frame now as well. So to do that, go ahead and once again pull out your 28 gauge round dead soft wire. And we're going to cut another 3-inch piece of that. There we go. So first things first, we're going to bend this in half at the center. And then go ahead and set it over your the top of your beaded portion right over the base of the spiral there. And then we're going to sandwich it together with our little twisted loop back behind. And we're going to use that little U-shaped piece of wire, crossing the tails over, to start wrapping that whole area together. There we go, and we'll cross it over again. And do the same thing with the other tail. And again, just wrapping that around the base of our little spirals. There we go, so you should have two loose tails now, looking like that. And go ahead and give them each a really good tug to make sure everything is tight and secure there like you want it to be. There we go, and we're going to take one of those and push it down through the top of that small open spiral. So go ahead and pull it through underneath. And then I'm going to slide it up around, coming up and over, and just bind that whole area a few times to connect it. And I like to do about 3 or 4 wraps here over this area. There we go. Again, pushing that tail down, pulling it through, and really giving it a tug to make sure everything is nice and secure. Alright, so let's go ahead and do the same thing with the other tail on the other side. Again, feeding it through so that you are capturing that spiral above the beaded hoop. So pushing it through, grabbing it, making sure you don't capture that outer open spiral along the way. And we will once again put in several good wraps around that whole area. And it can be tricky to get the wires where you want it, so just take your time. You might want to cut slightly longer pieces of wires the first time you make this style, just so you have plenty of tails to work with and enough leverage, enough stuff to grip and push through where you need it to go. But even I get a little bit frustrated sometimes doing this just because it's a little bit fiddly getting everything tied off nicely at the end here, but I do feel like the final result is worth it. So we've got several good wraps in. Now we just need to deal with our tails on the underside here. So I'm going to trim them off on the inside where they won't show. And it was kind of hard to show exactly how I'm doing this, but basically I'm just cutting them off very close and then using my tweezer nose pliers to push the ends down so that they're not sticking out to catch on anything and unravel. And I like to use the very tips of my tweezer nose pliers to do that because they can really get in that space and manipulate it well. So there we go. And you might want to refine this a little bit, just adjusting that little twisted loop and the spiral at the top to make sure they are lying in front of each other, pointing straight up. There we go. So you should have something like that now. I do also like to flare out these outer metal rings slightly. I think that makes it look very nice. So I'm just using my thumb and fingers to do that, just flexing them out ever so slightly, just like that. And finally, to finish this off, we will need to add an ear wire. I like to use lever backs for this. I think they look very nice, but you can do whatever style you like. And to put it on, we're just going to slide it over that little twisted loop with the 18 gauge wire so that it sits right behind that little tight spiral we made. Just like that. You might need to pull it out a little bit so that it has room to dangle. But that's what it should look like. You want that spiral to be centered and a little bit below your ear wire. Just like so. So of course you would make your second earring just the same as this. The only thing you might want to mirror image would be that little spiral on the center. But you would just do that and have a pair of earrings. So there you go. I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, found it easy to follow. Feel free to leave a comment below if you ran into any issues or had any questions. And of course, I welcome feedback on future tutorial ideas. And if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a thumbs up and make sure you are subscribed and click that little notification bell so that you get notified when I post new videos. I do have lots more coming out. Thanks so much for watching and happy crafting!